Hello. Hello. My hair's a bit frizzy and crazy. I need a haircut. It's literally a huge lump. I find myself to be quite fascinating recently. At my current moment, I find myself quite fascinating. Mainly because, when I say all this, it sounds quite dramatic, but it's all okay because it's all part of life, and I find that fascinating. And I find honesty fascinating. I always have had this deep, compelling desire to be blatantly honest. And I was actually editing the last video I posted, and I was talking about aging and letting go of a childlike identity that you used to be able to cling to and rely on. And when I edit that, a part of me is like, of course, like, okay, like, that's a little honest, or that's like really deep of you, deep in me, you know, like, that's maybe a little too, you know, I'm like, how honest do I ever want to be? Like, is that embarrassing? Is that an invasion of my own feelings to share on the internet? But baby, do you have to go on a walk? We're going on a walk right now. Nevertheless, I find it compelling to be blatantly and utterly and uncomfortably honest. And all that to say, on here, on YouTube, on these like video diaries I've been making. Rocky, hold on. There's obviously this wanting to be something else. There's this desire to want to be a whole version. A version of yourself. Not even whole or whatever, but whatever. I totally understand that, like, this big, accomplished, successful version of yourself is, like, not something necessarily you need to chase to feel. And definitely not something I will be feeling within the next couple of years of being in my 20s. I totally understand that. But this urge and this desire to feel like a version of myself that makes sense. I have a desire to be a version of myself that makes sense. Not only on here, but in life. And the reality is it doesn't make sense. And I've been having a hard time making sense of who I am and what I want to do. Not in a way of, like, not in a severe way, not at all. Actually, in a quite leisurely way. You know, I have the privilege of being able to ask myself those questions and being able to choose and make a life for myself. And that's a really beautiful thing. So, although my disco ball shaking. Although what I'm saying can kind of, I think some people can kind of take it as like a thing of all bad, but it's not. Like, I don't see it as necessarily a bad thing. I can definitely get sad sometimes. And not very nice to myself, but it's all okay. Because it's all really a conversation of pleasure. And that's a conversation of privilege. And I'm really grateful for that. And even as I say that and recognize the privilege and the pleasure in being able to choose and make a life for myself, I think I kind of owe it to myself and people like myself to be blatantly honest about life and about struggles and what it takes to become something. If you want to do something with your life, do something or accomplish something bigger than yourself and important and if you want to help a lot of people and inspire a lot of people and do hard things and do big things on a wide scale that a lot of people might see and partake in. And I also find myself clinging on to, or looking to cling on to an example, like who has done this before, who can inspire me, like where do I go from here at this moment. I find myself, just like I said, wanting to make sense of things. You know, I actually wrote this, I totally forgot I wrote this. I wrote this little journaling about, I actually literally can't find my journal entry. Also, this is about to be finished and the year's not even over. But the journal entry was essentially about my love for movies and stories, and how I've witnessed a lot of people, I mean, like everyone you come across, they're able to seamlessly fit themselves into an archetype of life, into an archetype. And going through life, you see people and you see their stories unravel, and you see people write books about their stories, and you see people make movies about their stories, and you see these people you look up to in movies, you know, the characters. And because I love it so much, it's kind of like my language. You know, we look to movies and we look to these stories to almost guide us in a way, subconsciously, not literally, but, you know, we look to, like, just in my case, like, I'm a painter, and you look to, like, have the story of being a starving artist to a hugely successful, widely successful artist, like, that gets recognized by all these people, or something like that, you know? And I find myself wanting to cling on to this story, to any story, almost, like, to make sense, like, you know, like, where did I come from, and who am I becoming, and how can I translate that into my situation? And we look, like, I'm looking at this row of books, and I look at all these movies, and, you know, is it the shy girl who finds her voice? Is it the abandoned girl who learns her worth and learns her power? You know, like, and I'm not saying that I would take on something that's not me, but I just find myself, like, wishing I could cling to something that makes sense, like, to make sense of life. And nothing does. Nobody does. Nobody does. And I think that's sort of the hardest part of this time, when you kind of just really don't know where you're going, but you kind of have a sense of where you want to end up. And yeah, I don't know if any of that just made sense at all. But I just think being honest is fun, and I think that I want to make these videos even for myself, to look back on and see. I hate how I talk like so slow. And see, okay, anyway. To look back on and kind of witness my life and my becoming of whatever I become, and witness my thought processes and struggles, because I find it fascinating. I just find the human experience fascinating, and I find it fascinating that one day I will have children and they will have to go through experiences, and nothing could possibly be explained to them that could better be felt. You know, like, we all have to, I just think it's so interesting, like, we become adults and we all realize the same things eventually, you know, if you are looking in the right places. We all figure out the truth of life, and how it's not about having become, but it's all about the becoming. And, you know, it only takes experience to learn these things. And the next generation and every generation after me will have to learn and struggle the same exact way and figure out the same things. I don't know, I just find it really interesting. I don't even know what I'm talking about right now. But I guess this is a case for becoming. And I guess I'm saying all this to say that as an artist and as somebody who wants to create things, I want to do it honestly, and I want to commit to that. And with this channel, that's what I always wanted to do. You know, I find myself, this whole conversation stems upon I'm 23 now, so the question stems upon like the choices I've made from 18 to 23. I have gotten rerouted many times. I think it's so... Okay, we need to bookmark what I was going to say before. But I find myself getting easily frustrated with my life and the progress of my life and not being where I want to be, and not feeling like I could be not feeling like I'm where I could have been. And I always have to reflect on the fact that you have plans and life really does rewrite those plans, and life does get in the way. Not even get in the way, because the way is life. And like, plans change. They just change. People are people, and people have influence in your life, and they leave and they come in, and then they switch, and then things change and your plans change, and then you forget along the way what you wanted. And it's a lot of being rerouted. Your 20s are a lot of wrong turns, pit stops, steep hills, car problems. You know, it's like you're just rerouted a bunch of times. And I've been having to remind myself of that, to like give myself grace and not be so hard on myself. And like I said, now back to what I was saying, I can go back into journals, and since I was like 18, and my goal was always my goal when I first made this channel was to post videos about like finding my art style, and obviously fun vlogs, because life is meant to be lived and super fun as you could possibly make it. And my goal was to always find my art style, because I had zero ideas. I just didn't know anything about art and drawing and painting, and I tried to, you know, I was trying to do challenges that are popular, and just trying to do whatever, and it's totally fun. And you know, like what mediums I liked, you know, that was always kind of like my vision. And I didn't do that, but that's totally fine. But I can go back to my desire of, that desire in itself is finding who you are as an artist. And I think that that's still my vision. It's so funny when we look back at things and we realize I actually haven't been confused this whole time. I actually have known what I'm talking about. I've actually known what I wanted for a long time. And it's always kind of going back to that, but it's on a much deeper level right now. I mean, it's on a much deeper and more tangible level, I would say. Me trying to find my art style. But it's really not that. It's sort of me developing as an artist. And that can't really happen without being honest. So yeah, that can't really happen without being honest. And being an artist isn't just about drawing, or a drawing challenge, or painting, or commissions. It's a way of life. it is life. It is your life as an artist. And I think documenting that and having people be witness to it and making this for myself to witness in the future and just to witness firsthand, I suppose, my becoming as an artist is what I'm gonna do, and the direction this channel will go in, hopefully, if I don't reroute myself again into some God knows what territory, and if life allows. And I think that's really exciting, and I think that's okay if you relate to this in any way, if you feel like you have been almost flirting with life in different ways and never committing to the parts of your life that you've always wanted to commit to. Those things take time. Most unfortunately, you know, you wish you could know everything from the beginning, but you don't. But also, you kind of do, in a really weird, small way. And I would say, if you relate to that in any way, to anything I just said, if you relate to anything I just said, you're probably very hard on yourself. And I would encourage you to give yourself a lot of grace. And remember how far you've come. If you don't journal, because you will be able to reflect on your headspace and what you were thinking. Because sometimes you look back and I could look back at when I was 21 and I was like, gosh, what was I thinking? Like, what the... And it gets frustrating because you wish you would have made better choices, or started on something sooner, or took that opportunity you totally dismissed. But it's okay, because when you start to like live in the flow state of creating and honestly becoming and doing work on yourself, and you have goals of helping a lot of people and inspiring a lot of people, and your goals aren't vain and selfish, and they're very, if you have a really kind and pure heart, then I do believe those things happen for a reason. I don't know if everything happens for a reason, but I do think you can give reason to everything. I don't know about that one. That's still developing. I don't know if everything happens for a reason. But I do believe when you live in that flow state out of a pure and kind heart to help, and you want to help humanity in any way you can, and use your gifts in any way you can, and you walk in grace with people, I think things do happen for a reason. And I think the puzzle pieces are just coming together for you. Now, if you don't have a kind and pure heart, and you don't, if you lack what I just said, I don't know what the heck is going on with your life. But I like to think that if something that I needed to happen didn't happen 5 years ago, that it's for a reason, and that if I didn't go on a journey I wish I did 5 years ago, then that was hopefully for a reason. And yeah, so what else do I have to say? I think a part of becoming is those moments when you when you don't really recognize yourself, and because you're in the middle of letting go of the past and you don't quite have hold of the future, I think it becomes very scary, and that's the best way I can describe it, is you just don't recognize yourself anymore. And I think that's okay. I think that's just a part of the process. And don't be scared, but be encouraged, because I think, you know, if a butterfly looks in the mirror, it doesn't recognize itself because it was a caterpillar. And I think that's just a part of the process. So I want to say that. And I don't know what else I want to say in this video, but you know, I think life's so interesting, and as an artist I see the art in my humanity and I find it fascinating and beautiful, and in other people's humanities I find it fascinating and beautiful and interesting and weird and crazy, and I think that's a fun thing to talk about. So I guess if anybody found this video interesting or felt seen in any way, or yeah, I don't know, I don't really know, but I'm finding out, so that's good. This video's at like 25 minutes, so yeah, I think it would be a travesty not to document the becoming of something I hope ends up being very beautiful and hopefully poetic. And I'm gonna paint today. I don't think I'm going to record because I really want to focus my full attention on, you know, really thinking about what I'm doing without recording, even though recording is awesome. And yeah, I don't know how to end this. Goodbye.